The dust settled around the boots of Ethan Sinclair as he dismounted his horse outside the small train station in Wallace, New Mexico Territory. The late afternoon sun of September 1882 beating down on his weathered hat. He had just finished a 3-week cattle drive and wanted nothing more than a hot meal and a soft bed, but the sound of quiet sobbing stopped him in his tracks as he tied his mare to the hitching post. A young woman sat on a wooden bench near the platform, her shoulders shaking with each muffled cry she tried to suppress. Her traveling dress, once fine but now dusty from the road, suggested she had come from somewhere with more refinement than this frontier town. Dark hair escaped from beneath her bonnet, and even from a distance, Ethan could see the desperation in the way she clutched a small carpet bag to her chest. He stood there for a moment, uncertain whether to approach. In his 30 years of life, he had learned that a crying woman usually meant trouble, and trouble was the last thing he needed. But something in the way she held herself, trying so hard to maintain dignity even as tears streamed down her face, pulled at something deep in his chest. "Miss." His voice was rough from days of shouting orders over bellowing cattle and wind. "Are you all right?" She looked up, startled, her green eyes wide and glistening. For a moment she seemed about to lie, to say everything was fine, but then her face crumpled again and fresh tears spilled over. "I have no ticket home," she whispered, her voice breaking on the last word. Ethan took off his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. "Where is home?" "Boston," she said, and that one word explained so much about her refined manner, her obvious discomfort in this rough town. "I came out here because I was supposed to marry a man, a correspondence match. My father arranged it before he died last year. But when I arrived in Santa Fe 2 weeks ago, I discovered he had died of cholera 3 months past. No one bothered to write and tell me." She wiped at her eyes with a handkerchief that had seen better days. "I spent what little money I had left on food and lodging while I tried to figure out what to do. I thought perhaps I could find work, but—" She gestured helplessly at the town around them, at the saloons and rough establishments that dominated Wallace's Main Street. "There is no respectable work for a woman alone here. I sold my mother's brooch yesterday to pay for passage this far, thinking maybe I could wire my aunt in Boston, but the telegraph office says the lines are down. They have been for days. And now I am stuck here with 17 cents to my name and no way home." Her name was Zara Fontaine, she told him when he asked, and she was 24 years old, which made her 6 years his junior. She had been a school teacher back in Boston, living with her elderly aunt after her parents passed. The promise of marriage to a prosperous merchant in the New Mexico Territory had seemed like an answer to prayers, a chance for security and perhaps even happiness. Instead, it had become a nightmare. Ethan listened to all of this while the sun continued its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He knew he should walk away, should leave this woman to her problems and focus on his own life. But something about Zara Fontaine made that impossible. Maybe it was the way she tried so hard not to impose, even as she told her story. Maybe it was the intelligence in her eyes, or the determined set to her jaw despite her tears. Or maybe it was simply that he recognized the look of someone who had been dealt an unfair hand by life, and he had always been a sucker for the underdog. "The train does not come through again until Friday," he said slowly. "That is 4 days from now. And even if the telegraph lines are fixed by then, you cannot wait here at the station with no money and no food." "I know," she said miserably. "I have been trying to think what to do, but every option seems impossible." He made a decision that would change both their lives, though neither of them knew it yet. There is a boarding house at the edge of town, run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. She is respectable, and she would not turn away a woman in need. I will pay for a room for you for the week and leave money for your meals." Zara's eyes went wide. "I cannot accept that. I do not even know you, Mr. Sinclair, Ethan Sinclair, and you can accept it because the alternative is sleeping on that bench or worse." He said it more gruffly than he intended, made uncomfortable by the gratitude already forming in her expression. "But it is too much. How would I ever repay you? Consider it a loan, if that makes you feel better. When you get back to Boston and get settled, you can send the money to me care of the post office here." He knew even as he said it that he would probably never see that money, but it did not matter. He had done well enough on the cattle drive to afford a little charity. She stood up, clutching her bag, and he realized she was taller than he had first thought, probably close to 5.5 feet. "Mr. Sinclair, I do not know what to say. You are incredibly kind." "I am incredibly hungry and tired," he corrected, "and standing here talking is not helping either of those conditions. Come on, I will walk you to the boarding house." Wallace was not much of a town. Just one main street with buildings clustering on either side, and a few houses spreading out into the surrounding scrubland. The boarding house sat at the quieter end, a 2-story wooden structure that had been painted white at some point but was now faded to a weathered gray. Mrs. Patterson answered the door, a plump woman in her 50s with shrewd but not unkind eyes. Ethan explained the situation while Zara stood quietly beside him, her hands clasped in front of her. Mrs. Patterson looked between them, clearly making her own assessments and assumptions, but she agreed readily enough when he paid for the room and meals in advance. "You will be safe here," the widow told Zara firmly. "I run a respectable establishment. There are 2 other ladies staying here currently, both school teachers who work at the mission school. Meals are at 7 in the morning, noon, and 6 in the evening. Do not be late or you will go hungry." After Zara was settled, Ethan found himself walking toward the saloon, his stomach growling and his mind churning. He had done his good deed. He could check on her tomorrow, make sure the telegraph lines were being repaired, and then he could go back to his own life. His own small ranch was 2 days' ride from Wallace, and he had been away for almost a month. There was work waiting for him there. But that night, as he ate a tough steak and drank whiskey at a corner table, his thoughts kept drifting back to green eyes and the brave tilt of a chin even through tears. He told himself it was just natural sympathy, nothing more. The next morning found him back at the boarding house before he quite understood why. Mrs. Patterson answered his knock with a knowing look that made him feel like a kid caught stealing apples. "Miss Fontaine is in the dining room having breakfast," she said, stepping aside to let him enter. Zara looked up in surprise when he appeared in the doorway. She had changed into a different dress. This one, a simple gray that suggested it was one of only a few she owned. Her hair was neatly arranged and the tears were gone, replaced by a composed expression that could not quite hide the worry in her eyes. "Mr. Sinclair, I did not expect to see you again." "I wanted to check on you," he said, then felt foolish for stating the obvious. "And I thought I should visit the telegraph office, see if they have any news on when the lines will be repaired." Hope flickered across her face. "Would you? I thought about going myself this morning, but I was not sure of the way. It is right on the main street, hard to miss. But yes, I will check. Would you?" He hesitated, unsure if the offer was appropriate. "Would you like to walk with me? You should know your way around town in case you need anything while you are staying here." She agreed quickly, perhaps too quickly, and he realized she was probably going stir-crazy cooped up in the boarding house. They set out into the morning sunshine, the air still cool before the heat of the day set in. Wallace was already awake, shopkeepers sweeping their stoops and the blacksmith's hammer ringing out from his forge. The telegraph office was a small building sandwiched between the general store and the assay office. The operator, a thin man with spectacles, shook his head at Ethan's inquiry. Lines are still down somewhere between here and Santa Fe. Got a crew working on it, but they found multiple breaks. Could be another few days, maybe a week. Zara's face fell, but she thanked him politely before they stepped back outside. A week, she said quietly. Even if they fix it by then, and even if my aunt responds immediately, it would be days more before money could arrive. The Friday train will be long gone. There will be another train the following Tuesday, Ethan said, though he could see how the extension of her uncertainty weighed on her. They walked in silence for a moment before Zara spoke again. Tell me about your ranch, Mr. Sinclair. Mrs. Patterson mentioned you have land north of here. He found himself describing the small spread he had built over the past 8 years, the modest house he had constructed with his own hands, the 100 head of cattle that represented his life's work. He had come to New Mexico territory after the war with nothing but a horse and determination, working as a ranch hand until he had saved enough to buy his first parcel of land. It sounds wonderful, Zara said wistfully. I have always lived in cities. I cannot quite imagine all that space, all that freedom. It is hard work, he said honestly, especially alone, but yes, there is freedom in it, no one telling you what to do or how to live. That must be nice. Something in her tone made him look at her more closely. She was gazing out at the scrubland beyond the town, her expression distant. I have always had to answer to someone. My father, then my aunt, then the school board. Even coming here was not really my choice but a duty I was expected to fulfill. They continued walking, somehow ending up at the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open land. In the distance, mountains rose up purple and hazy in the morning light. What will you do when you get back to Boston? He asked. Return to teaching, I suppose. Move back in with my aunt. It is a comfortable enough life. But she did not sound enthusiastic about it. You do not want that, he observed. She was quiet for a long moment. I wanted an adventure when I agreed to come out here. I know that sounds foolish, but living with my aunt, teaching the same lessons year after year, never going anywhere or seeing anything new. I thought perhaps marriage to a stranger in a strange land would at least be interesting. Instead, it has just been frightening and lonely. It does not have to be just that, Ethan heard himself say. The West is not all danger and roughness. There is beauty here too if you know where to look. Something shifted between them in that moment, something neither could quite name. Zara met his eyes and smiled, a real smile that lit up her whole face, and Ethan felt his chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with the altitude. He spent the rest of the day showing her around Wallace, introducing her to the more respectable shopkeepers and pointing out which establishments to avoid. She was curious about everything, asking questions about the territory's history and the people who lived there. He found himself enjoying her company in a way he had not enjoyed anyone's in a long time. When he walked her back to the boarding house that evening, he was already planning to return the next day. And he did return, and the day after that. They fell into an easy pattern, meeting each morning and spending hours talking as they walked the outskirts of town or sat in the small park near the church. Ethan found himself telling her things he had never told anyone, about his time in the war, about his parents who had died of fever, about the loneliness of ranch life that he usually pretended did not bother him. Zara opened up too, describing her childhood in Boston, her love of books and learning, her frustration with the limited options available to women. She made him laugh with her dry observations about the differences between East and West, and she listened with genuine interest when he talked about cattle breeding and water rights and all the practical concerns of frontier life. On the 4th day, the telegraph operator found them at the general store where Ethan was helping Zara pick out some thread she needed to mend a dress. Lines are repaired, he announced. You can send your wire now, miss. They hurried to the office where Zara composed a carefully worded message to her aunt explaining the situation and requesting money for passage home. The operator assured them it would be sent immediately. "Now we wait," Zara said as they stepped back outside. She should have sounded relieved, Ethan thought, but instead she just sounded sad. "Could be a few days before you get a response," he said. "You will likely miss Friday's train, but the Tuesday one should work." "Yes," she looked down at her hands. "I suppose this means our walks will be coming to an end soon." "I suppose so." The words felt like stones in his mouth. They stood there awkwardly until Zara finally said, "We should make the most of the time I have left then. You said yesterday you might show me the river." The river was a 30-minute walk from town, following a path that wound through scrubland dotted with sage and cactus. It was not much more than a creek really, but it ran year-round and supported a line of cottonwood trees that provided blessed shade. Ethan had come here often when he stayed in Wallace, finding peace in the sound of running water. They sat on the bank, watching the water flow past and listening to the birds in the trees above. The heat of the day was building, but here it was bearable, almost pleasant. "I am going to miss this," Zara said quietly. "I know that probably sounds strange since I have only been here a few days, but I am going to miss this place. Miss this." "Miss what exactly?" His heart was beating harder than it should be, this feeling of possibility, of not knowing what comes next but feeling excited about it instead of afraid. "You have given me that, Ethan." She had started using his first name 2 days ago, and he had not objected. "For the first time in my life, I have felt truly free, even though technically I have been stranded." He should have let it go, should have accepted the compliment and moved on. Instead, he found himself saying, "What if you did not go back?" She turned to look at him, her eyes wide. "What? What if you stayed here? In the territory, I mean." "You said yourself there is nothing waiting for you in Boston except the same old life. You wanted an adventure." "But what would I do? Where would I live? I cannot impose on your charity forever, and I have no prospects here." "You could teach." "There is a new town being built up near my ranch, just a handful of families now, but growing. They have been talking about starting a school but have not been able to find a teacher willing to come out there." "You want me to move to some barely existent town to teach?" She sounded incredulous. "I want you to be happy," he said, and realized it was completely true. In just 4 days, this woman had become important to him in a way he could not fully explain. "And you do not seem like you would be happy going back to Boston." "Even if what you say is true, even if this town needs a teacher, that would not solve all my problems. I would need somewhere to live, and teaching does not pay much, especially not in a frontier town. I would be trading one precarious situation for another." Ethan took a deep breath, knowing he was about to take a leap that could not be undone. "You could live with me. As my wife, I mean, if you wanted." The silence that followed was so complete he could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Zara stared at him, her mouth slightly open, clearly too shocked to speak. "I know we have only known each other a few days," he continued quickly, the words tumbling out now that he had started. "And I know this is not how these things are usually done, but I feel something for you, Zara. Something real. And I think maybe you feel it too. We get along well. We make each other laugh. I own land and a house, and I could provide for you. You would have freedom and security both, and there would be no pressure I would not expect. That is, we could take things as slowly as you wanted. I just want you to stay." "You are proposing to me," she said faintly. "Yes, I suppose I am. We have known each other for 4 days. I know it is crazy. Forget I said anything." He started to stand up, embarrassment flooding through him, but her hand on his arm stopped him. "Wait." "I did not say no." He sat back down slowly, barely daring to hope. "You did not." "No, I did not." A smile was tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Because you are right. I do feel something for you. I have felt it since that first day when you could have just walked past me but stopped instead. And every day since then, it has only grown stronger. I find myself thinking about you constantly, looking forward to seeing you, feeling disappointed when our time together ends each evening. Zara, he breathed. But this is still crazy, she continued. Marriage is not something to be entered into lightly. What if we are making a mistake? What if these feelings are just the result of extraordinary circumstances and will not last once life becomes ordinary? What if they do last? He countered. What if this is the beginning of something amazing? You wanted an adventure. Well, here it is, she laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. Some adventure, agreeing to marry a man I have known for less than a week. You came all this way to marry a man you had never met at all, he pointed out. At least you know me. That is true. She bit her lip, clearly thinking hard. And I do know you in a way. I know you are kind and generous. I know you work hard and value honesty. I know you make me feel safe and understood in a way I never have before. I know that when I think about getting on that train and never seeing you again, my heart feels like it is breaking. Then stay, he said, taking her hand. Marry me. We will figure out the rest as we go. This is insane, she whispered. Probably. We could be making a terrible mistake. We could be, but I am going to say yes anyway. The words came out in a rush, followed by a laugh of disbelief. Yes, Ethan Sinclair, I will marry you. He kissed her then, his first kiss in years, and felt her respond with an eagerness that matched his own. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard and grinning like fools. We should do this properly, he said. Get married by the minister here in Wallace before we head to the ranch. I do not want anyone thinking less of you for traveling with an unmarried man. When? She asked. Tomorrow, if the minister will do it. No point in waiting once we have decided. Tomorrow, she repeated, testing the word. By tomorrow night I will be married, Mrs. Sinclair. If you want to take my name, you do not have to. I want to, she said firmly. I want everything this new life offers. They talked for hours there by the river, making plans and sharing dreams. Ethan described his ranch in more detail, preparing her for the reality of frontier life. It would not be easy, he warned. The house was small and simple, the nearest neighbor was miles away, and there were real dangers from weather, animals, and occasionally hostile raiders. But Zara seemed undaunted. I am stronger than I look, she assured him. And I am not afraid of hard work or isolation. I am only afraid of living a life that does not mean anything, of being trapped and small forever. This might be crazy, but at least it is not that. When they finally returned to town, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Ethan walked Zara to the boarding house, and then immediately headed to the church to speak with Reverend Williams. The minister was a tall, spare man in his 60s who had come to the territory to bring religion to the frontier. He listened to Ethan's request with raised eyebrows but did not refuse. Son, I am not in the habit of questioning God's plan, and if you say you want to marry this woman, I will perform the ceremony. But I would be remiss if I did not ask if you are certain. Marriage is a sacred covenant, not something to be entered into hastily. I am certain, Reverend, more certain than I have been about anything in a long time. The minister studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. Bring the young lady to the church tomorrow at 10 o'clock. You will need witnesses, at least 2. Ethan enlisted Mrs. Patterson, who was surprised but seemed pleased by the turn of events, and Jake Morrison, a fellow rancher he had worked cattle drives with over the years. Jake's surprise was considerably more vocal. You are marrying the girl you just met, the one you have known for what, less than a week? 4 days, Ethan confirmed. 4 days. Have you lost your mind? Possibly. Will you stand up with me or not? Jake shook his head in disbelief but agreed. I hope you know what you are doing, friend. Marriage is hard enough when you have been courting properly for months. Jumping into it like this. I know the risks, Ethan said. I am doing it anyway. That night, lying in his room at the boarding house, Ethan could not sleep. His mind raced with everything he needed to do, all the ways this could go wrong, and underneath it all, a deep current of excitement and hope. He was getting married. Tomorrow, Zara Fontaine would become his wife. In another room, Zara was having similar thoughts. She sat at the small desk, pen in hand, trying to compose a letter to her aunt explaining her decision. How could she make her aunt understand when she barely understood it herself? All she knew was that, when she thought about the future now, it was filled with possibility instead of resignation. She was choosing her own path for once, however reckless it might seem. Finally, she wrote simply that she had met someone, that she was getting married and staying in the territory, and that she would write again once she was settled. It felt inadequate, but it would have to do. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. Zara dressed in her best remaining dress, a blue cotton that brought out her eyes. She had no flowers, no veil, no family to see her off. But Mrs. Patterson fussed over her hair and lent her a cameo brooch that had belonged to her own mother, something borrowed. And one of the other boarders produced a clean white handkerchief embroidered with blue flowers. Something blue and something new, the young woman said shyly. She was one of the school teachers Mrs. Patterson had mentioned, and she seemed genuinely happy for Zara despite barely knowing her. At 10 o'clock, Zara walked into the small wooden church to find Ethan waiting near the altar. He had shaved and was wearing a clean shirt and jacket that looked relatively new. His face lit up when he saw her, and whatever doubts she had been harboring disappeared in that moment. The ceremony was simple and quick. Reverend Williams led them through the traditional vows, his voice solemn in the quiet church. When he pronounced them husband and wife and told Ethan he could kiss his bride, the kiss was gentle and sweet and full of promise. Afterwards, Jake insisted on buying them lunch at the hotel restaurant, the nicest establishment in Wallace. Over roast chicken and potatoes, he regaled Zara with stories about Ethan, some embarrassing, all clearly told with affection. "You are getting a good man," he told her seriously. "Stubborn as a mule sometimes, and he works too hard, but his word is solid and his heart is true. You could do a lot worse out here." "I know," Zara said, smiling at her new husband. "Believe me, I know." After lunch, they retrieved Zara's few belongings from the boarding house. Mrs. Patterson hugged her and made her promise to visit if she was ever in Wallace again. Then, Ethan led her to the livery stable where his horse was boarded. "We will need to ride double until we get to the ranch," he explained. "I was not exactly planning on bringing home a wife when I set out on that cattle drive, but I will buy you your own horse as soon as possible." "I should probably warn you, I have never ridden a horse," Zara admitted. "Never, carriages and trolleys, that is all. Horses were for the wealthy in Boston." He helped her up into the saddle, then swung up behind her, his arms coming around her to hold the reins. Despite the awkwardness of the position, Zara found she liked being held like this, feeling the solid warmth of him at her back. They rode out of Wallace heading north, following a wagon road that gradually dwindled to a rough trail. The land around them was vast and open, dotted with scrub brush and cactus, stretching out to distant mountains that seemed to shimmer in the afternoon heat. "It is so empty," Zara said, awed by the sheer scale of it. "Wait until you see the ranch," Ethan said. "This is nothing." They rode through the afternoon, stopping occasionally to rest the horse and stretch. Ethan pointed out landmarks and explained the geography of the region. There was a town about 20 miles from his ranch, he told her, though calling it a town was generous. More like a trading post with a few houses around it. "That is where those families I mentioned live, the ones who want to start a school." There are about a dozen children of school age now, with more expected as more settlers arrive. The community would pay you to teach them, probably not much at first, but something. I would like that, Zara said. I know being a rancher's wife will keep me busy, but I would miss teaching if I gave it up completely. They camped that night under the stars, Ethan building a small fire and preparing a simple meal of beans and coffee. He had packed bedrolls for both of them, placing them on opposite sides of the fire without comment. I meant what I said about taking things slowly, he told her quietly as they settled down for the night. I know this is all very sudden. We do not have to do anything you are not ready for. Zara looked at him across the fire at this man who had become her husband and felt a surge of affection and desire mixed together. I appreciate that, and I am nervous, but I do want to be a real wife to you, Ethan, just maybe not tonight, not after such a long day. Whenever you are ready, he assured her. We have all the time in the world now. She fell asleep listening to the sound of his breathing and the crackling of the fire, feeling safer than she had in months. The next day they reached the ranch around midday. It was smaller than Zara had imagined somehow, but also more real. The house was a simple wooden structure, single story, with a covered porch running along the front. There was a barn and a corral, both showing signs of good maintenance. Beyond that, the land rolled away in gentle hills covered with grass, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance. It is not much, Ethan said, suddenly sounding uncertain. But it is sturdy and the roof does not leak, and there is a good well with sweet water. It is perfect, Zara said and meant it. This was hers now, hers and Ethan's together. A home, a real home, not just a place she was staying temporarily. He helped her down from the horse and led her inside. The interior was basic but clean. One main room that served as kitchen and living area, with a door leading to a bedroom and another to a small storage room. I know it is not what you are used to, he started to say, but she cut him off. It is exactly what I need. A fresh start, remember. Over the next few days, they settled into a routine. Ethan worked on the ranch, tending to the cattle and handling the endless list of repairs and maintenance tasks that came with running a property. Zara explored the house and began putting her own stamp on it, cleaning and organizing and figuring out how to cook over the wood stove. She was not a good cook, having never had to do much of it back in Boston. Her first attempts at making bread resulted in flat, hard discs that they jokingly used as plates. But Ethan was patient, showing her what he knew and laughing with her over her failures rather than at them. At night, they sat on the porch and talked as the sun set, sharing stories from their pasts and dreams for their future. The physical distance between them gradually decreased, moving from opposite ends of the porch to sitting close together, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. On their 5th night at the ranch, after a week of marriage, Zara finally felt ready to fully commit to this new life. She took Ethan's hand as they prepared for bed and led him to their room, to the bed they had been sharing chastely up until now. I am ready, she whispered. If you still want to wait, I understand, but I am ready. His answer was to kiss her deeply, his hands gentle as they undid the buttons of her dress. Their wedding night came late, but when it did, it was everything Zara had hoped for, tender and passionate and full of love that was already taking root between them. Afterwards, lying in his arms in the darkness, she knew she had made the right choice. This crazy, impulsive decision to marry a stranger had turned out to be the best thing she had ever done. The weeks that followed were full of hard work and happiness. Ethan taught Zara how to ride, first on an old gentle mare he borrowed from Jake Morrison, and then on a spirited chestnut gelding he bought for her at a ranch auction. She fell off more times than she could count during those early lessons but got back on every time, determined to master this essential skill of her new life. She also learned to shoot, both rifle and pistol, at Ethan's insistence. "You need to be able to protect yourself," he said seriously. "I am not always here, and there are dangers in this country. I need to know you can handle yourself if something happens." Zara proved to be a surprisingly good shot once she got over her initial fear of the weapons. There was something satisfying about the focus required, the way everything else fell away except the target and the weight of the gun in her hands. In return, she taught Ethan to read better than his basic skills allowed. He could manage signs and simple letters, but he had never had much formal education. Most evenings found them sitting together by lamplight, Zara patiently working through books with him while he slowly gained confidence. "I always felt stupid for not reading well," he confessed one night. "Most of the men I know cannot read at all, but it still bothered me." "You are not stupid," Zara said firmly. "You just never had the opportunity to learn. That is not the same thing at all." A month after their arrival at the ranch, they rode together to the small settlement Ethan had mentioned, the one that needed a teacher. It was called Cedar Springs, named for a stand of juniper trees near a natural spring that served as the community's water source. The settlement consisted of about 15 buildings scattered around a central common area, with more homesteads visible in the distance. The residents were hardworking families trying to make a go of it in the territory, farmers and small ranchers like Ethan. The community leader, a woman named Martha Green, was delighted to learn that Zara was a trained teacher. "We have been praying for someone to teach our children," she said fervently. "We cannot afford much, but we can pay a small salary and all of us will contribute what we can, food and goods if not money." They offered the use of a small building that had been constructed as a church, but was rarely used since they had no regular minister. Zara examined it and found it would suit her needs perfectly with a little work. "I can start in 2 weeks," she told them. "That will give you time to spread the word and me time to prepare lessons and materials." Over the next 2 weeks, Zara threw herself into preparing for the school. She ordered slates and chalk, primers and readers from the general store in Wallace, paid for with part of the money Ethan had saved. The community donated a large table that could serve as her desk and rough benches for the children to sit on. On the first day of school, 12 children showed up, ranging in age from 6 to 14. They were shy at first, these ranch and farm children who had never had formal schooling, but Zara's warmth and enthusiasm soon won them over. She taught reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also geography and history, opening up worlds beyond the frontier to these isolated children. She told them about oceans they had never seen, cities they could barely imagine, and ideas that made them think differently about their own lives. Teaching 3 days a week meant Zara had to make the hour-long ride to Cedar Springs and back, but she did not mind. The work fulfilled something essential in her, and seeing the children's progress and excitement about learning made every hardship worthwhile. Life settled into a rhythm. The seasons changed, summer heat giving way to the cooler temperatures of autumn. The cattle fattened on the fall grass, and Ethan began planning for the winter ahead, calculating how much hay they would need to cut and store. One evening in late October, nearly 2 months after their wedding, Zara realized her monthly courses were late. She had been feeling tired and slightly queasy in the mornings, symptoms she had attributed to the hard physical work of ranch life. But now, counting back, she realized it had been more than 6 weeks since her last cycle. She waited another week to be sure, then told Ethan one night as they lay in bed, "I think I might be pregnant." He went very still beside her. "You think?" "I am almost certain. All the signs are there. I would need to see a doctor to be completely sure, but I know my own body." "A baby," he said softly, wonder in his voice. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Are you happy?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. They had never discussed children, had not planned this so soon. "Happy, Zara, I am thrilled. Terrified too, I will admit, but mostly thrilled." He kissed her forehead. "We are going to be parents." The pregnancy progressed normally through the fall and into winter. Zara continued teaching through the end of the year, finally stopping when the January cold made the long rides too difficult, and her growing belly made mounting a horse awkward. She spent the long winter days preparing for the baby's arrival, sewing tiny clothes and blankets, setting up a cradle that Ethan built with his own hands. The house felt cozy and warm despite the snow outside, the wood stove crackling and casting dancing shadows on the walls. Ethan was attentive and worried, constantly asking if she felt all right, if she needed anything. She found his concern endearing even when it bordered on excessive. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she would tease him. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." "Not my woman carrying my baby," he would reply. "That is different." In late February, on a day when spring seemed impossibly far away, Zara's water broke while she was kneading bread. Ethan immediately rode to Cedar Springs to fetch Martha Green, who had experience as a midwife, while Zara tried to remain calm and focus on breathing through the contractions that were already starting. Martha arrived within 2 hours, bringing 2 other women with her. They took over with calm efficiency, boiling water, preparing clean cloths, and helping Zara through what would turn out to be a long and difficult labor. 16 hours later, as dawn broke over the ranch, Zara gave birth to a son. He came into the world screaming indignantly, his tiny fists waving, and when Martha placed him in Zara's arms, she felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. Ethan, who had been banished to the other room during the actual delivery, was allowed back in to meet his son. He stood by the bed, staring down at the tiny bundle in Zara's arms with an expression of absolute awe. "He is perfect," he whispered. "He is," Zara agreed, exhausted but happy. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their son's red, wrinkled face, Ethan said, "Thomas, after my father." "Thomas Sinclair," Zara tested the name. "I like it. Thomas Ethan Sinclair." Little Thomas proved to be a healthy, hungry baby who kept them up at all hours. Those first months were exhausting, filled with endless diaper changes and night feedings, and worrying over every little cough or cry. But they were also filled with joy, with first smiles and tiny hands grasping their fingers, with the wonder of watching this little person who was part of both of them grow and develop. Zara did not return to teaching that spring, too occupied with caring for Thomas. But by fall, when he was 6 months old and starting to become more independent, she began to miss the classroom. Martha Green offered to watch Thomas during the days Zara taught, and soon she was back at the school, sharing her days between her 2 loves, teaching and motherhood. The first year of their marriage passed, then the second. Life was not always easy. There were droughts that stressed the cattle and their finances. There were illnesses, thankfully minor but frightening nonetheless. There were moments of frustration when the isolation got to them, when Zara missed cultural opportunities she had taken for granted in Boston, or when Ethan struggled with ranch challenges that seemed insurmountable. But through it all, their love deepened and matured. The passionate excitement of their whirlwind courtship settled into something steadier but no less powerful, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared goals, and genuine affection. Cedar Springs continued to grow, becoming a real town with a general store, a blacksmith, and eventually a proper schoolhouse built specifically for Zara's use. The community thrived, and Zara's school became a source of pride, known throughout the region for its quality education. When Thomas was 3 years old, Zara became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect. She taught right up until a week before her due date, then gave birth to a daughter they named Alina, after Zara's mother. Alina was a quieter baby than Thomas had been, content to observe the world with solemn dark eyes. She adored her big brother from the start, smiling whenever he was near, and Thomas took his role as protector seriously, always making sure his little sister was safe and happy. The years continued to pass, marked by the milestones of their growing family. Thomas learned to ride before he could read, sitting in front of his father on the saddle and pestering Ethan with endless questions about cattle and horses. Alina showed an early love of books, spending hours looking at pictures and later learning to read from her mother. When Alina was 2, Zara had another son, whom they named William after Ethan's grandfather. Will, as they called him, was a wild child from the start, fearless and adventurous, giving them more heart attacks before his 5th birthday than the other 2 had combined. The ranch prospered over the years. Ethan made smart decisions about breeding stock and land management, and slowly their herd grew. They added on to the house, building 2 more bedrooms to accommodate their growing family and a proper parlor for entertaining the increasingly frequent visitors from Cedar Springs and beyond. Zara's school continued to be a cornerstone of the community. She taught not just basic subjects, but also pushed her students to think critically, to question and explore. Many of her former students went on to higher education, something rare for frontier children, and they always credited Mrs. Sinclair with opening their eyes to possibilities beyond ranching and farming. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ethan planned a surprise. He arranged for the children to stay with Martha Green for a weekend, and took Zara on a trip to Santa Fe, her first visit to a real city since arriving in the territory. They stayed in a hotel, a luxury after years of ranch life, and Ethan took her to restaurants and shops, buying her a new dress and a string of pearls that she protested was too expensive but secretly treasured. They attended a theater performance, holding hands in the darkness like newlyweds, and danced to a live orchestra playing waltzes and polkas. "You ever regret it?" Ethan asked her one night as they stood on the hotel balcony looking out at the city lights. "Giving up your old life, marrying a stranger, staying in the territory?" Zara looked at him in surprise. "How could I regret the best decision I ever made? This life, our life together, our children, everything we have built, it is more than I ever dreamed possible when I was crying on that train platform 10 years ago. You never think about what you gave up, though. The culture, the refinement of Boston, the safety of a known world." "I think about it sometimes," she admitted. "I would be lying if I said I never missed certain things, but I do not regret leaving it behind. That life was not really mine, Ethan. I was just living a script someone else wrote. This life, this crazy, beautiful, hard, wonderful life, this is mine. Ours. We chose it, and I choose it again every single day." He pulled her close, kissing her with the passion that had never really faded despite 10 years of marriage and 3 children and all the mundane realities of life together. "I love you," he said simply. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you crying on that bench, even though I did not know it yet." "I love you too," she whispered back. "My cowboy who stopped to help a stranded woman and ended up giving her everything she never knew she needed." They returned to the ranch the next day, back to the noise and chaos of their children and the endless work that awaited them. But they returned together, partners in every sense of the word, bound by love and choice and the decade of life they had built. More years passed. Thomas grew into a tall, serious young man who loved ranching as much as his father and took on more and more responsibility as he got older. Alina became a teacher herself, working alongside her mother at the school and bringing her own innovations and ideas. Will eventually settle down enough to be useful, developing a gift for working with horses that served the ranch well. Zara and Ethan grew older together, their hair graying, their bodies showing the wear of hard frontier life. But they remained each other's best friend and greatest love, still holding hands on the porch in the evenings, still sharing their thoughts and dreams. The territory became a state, bringing changes both welcome and concerning. Cedar Springs became a real town with its own post office and marshal, connected to the wider world by telegraph and regular train service. The frontier was disappearing, becoming more civilized and settled. When Ethan was 55 and Zara 49, they became grandparents for the first time. Thomas married a woman from a neighboring ranch, and they had a son they named Ethan, after his grandfather. The old Ethan held his tiny namesake with tears in his eyes, marveling at the continuation of their legacy. Alina married a teacher from back east who came to New Mexico for his health and stayed for love. They had twin girls who inherited their grandmother's love of learning and their grandfather's determination. Will married late, choosing a spirited woman who matched his energy, and they had 4 children in quick succession, filling every family gathering with noise and laughter. The ranch continued under the combined leadership of Ethan and Thomas, now large enough to support both families comfortably. The house had been added onto so many times it was 3 times its original size, sprawling and comfortable, always full of people. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled the house and yard, and friends from Cedar Springs and beyond came to honor the couple whose love story had become something of a legend in the area. Martha Green, now elderly but still sharp, made a toast. 25 years ago, I thought you two were making a terrible mistake, marrying after knowing each other less than a week. I figured we would be hearing about a divorce or worse within months, but you proved me wrong in the best possible way. You built something real and lasting, not just a marriage but a family, a home, a legacy. You showed all of us that sometimes the crazy choice is the right choice. Ethan and Zara stood together, his arm around her waist, her hand on his chest, and looked out at the family they had created, the life they had built from that impulsive decision so many years ago. "Thank you all for being here," Zara said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "When I came to the territory all those years ago, I was lost and alone and so afraid. I had no idea that my disaster would turn into the greatest blessing of my life. Ethan saved me that day, but what I did not understand then was that he did not just save me from being stranded. He saved me from a life that was not fully lived. He gave me adventure and purpose and a love deeper than I ever imagined possible." She turned to her husband, this man who had been a stranger and became her everything. "You are my heart," she said simply. "You have been from the beginning, even when we did not know it yet." Ethan kissed her in front of everyone, not caring about propriety or dignity, and their family and friends cheered and applauded. The celebration went late into the night, with food and music and dancing under the stars. Little children chased each other around the yard while adults talked and laughed. It was everything a family gathering should be, full of love and joy and connection. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Ethan and Zara found themselves alone on the porch, sitting in the same spot where they had spent countless evenings over the past 25 years. "You remember our first night here?" Zara asked, leaning against his shoulder. "How uncertain everything was, how we had no idea if we had made the right choice." "I remember being terrified," Ethan admitted. "Not of you, but of letting you down, of this not working out. You had given up so much to stay with me. And you gave me everything," she said softly. Look at this life, Ethan. Look at what we have created together. Three amazing children who have become wonderful adults, grandchildren to carry on our legacy. A ranch that prospers, a community we have helped build, and through it all, this love between us that has only grown stronger. I would do it all again, he said. Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would choose you every single time. As I would choose you, she replied. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out one by one, the same stars that had watched over them that first night when everything was new and uncertain. So much had changed since then, but the essential core of who they were together had remained constant. The years continued to be kind to them. They aged gracefully, staying active and involved in their ranch and community. Ethan taught his grandsons everything he knew about ranching, passing down knowledge and skills that had taken him a lifetime to acquire. Zara continued teaching well into her 60s, finally retiring when her joints made the long days difficult. They took to spending their mornings on the porch with coffee, watching the sun rise over land that had been their home for so many decades. They talked about everything and nothing, comfortable in the kind of companionship that only comes from a lifetime together. When Ethan was 71, he took sick with a fever that concerned everyone. The doctor came from Cedar Springs, now large enough to support a permanent physician, and prescribed rest and fluids. For a week, Zara barely left his side, bathing his forehead with cool cloths and coaxing him to drink water. "Do not you dare leave me," she whispered fiercely one night when his fever was highest. "We have been together for 46 years, and that is not nearly enough. I need another 46 at least." He recovered, though it took weeks before he regained his strength fully. The illness aged him noticeably, leaving him frailer than before. But his spirit remained strong, and his love for Zara burned as bright as ever. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the family threw another massive celebration. There were dozens of grandchildren now, and even a few great-grandchildren, the youngest generation bearing little resemblance to the frontier babies of earlier decades. They wore modern clothes and spoke of modern things like automobiles and motion pictures, living in a world that would have been unrecognizable to Ethan and Zara on their wedding day. But the core values remained the same, passed down through generations. Hard work, honesty, love of family, respect for the land. These were the Sinclair legacy, as important as any material inheritance. Ethan struggled to stand for the anniversary toast, his legs not as strong as they once were, but he managed with Zara's help. Looking out at the sea of faces, all connected to him and his wife through blood or marriage, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. 50 years ago, he began, his voice still strong even if his body was not. I was a cowboy who had nothing but a small ranch and big dreams. Then I saw a beautiful woman crying at a train station, and my whole life changed in a moment. Helping her was the easiest decision I ever made. Marrying her was the best. Everything good in my life comes back to that moment, to that choice to stop and offer help to a stranger. He turned to Zara, who was seated beside him, her own hair now completely white, her face lined with age but her eyes still the same brilliant green that had captured his heart so long ago. "You are my everything," he said simply. "You always have been. 50 years, and I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, and I loved you desperately even then." Zara stood, taking his hands in hers. "You saved me," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And then you gave me a life beyond anything I could have imagined. You gave me purpose and passion, and a love that sustained me through everything. I came west looking for security and found adventure instead. I married a stranger and found my soulmate. Thank you, Ethan Sinclair, for seeing me that day, for stopping when you could have walked past, for loving me every day since." They kissed, to the cheers and applause of their family, two old people who had never stopped being young lovers at heart. The party was smaller than the 25th anniversary, Ethan's energy limited, but no less meaningful. Their children and grandchildren shared stories and memories, weaving together the tapestry of 5 decades of family history. Late that night, after everyone had left or retired to their rooms, Ethan and Zara made their slow way to their bedroom. Age had made many things difficult, but they still slept curled together, Zara's head on Ethan's shoulder, his arm around her waist. 50 years, he murmured into the darkness. It is simultaneously forever and not nearly long enough. I know what you mean, she whispered back, but we have made good use of our time. Look at the legacy we are leaving. All those children and grandchildren, all those lives we have touched through the ranch and the school, the community we helped build. We have lived fully. We have, he agreed, but I am not ready to be done yet. I want more years with you. I want to see our great-grandchildren grow, to watch this family continue to flourish. Then we will have to stick around, she said with a smile he could hear, even if he could not see it in the darkness. You and me against the world, just like always. Just like always, he repeated, and they drifted off to sleep, secure in the love that had sustained them through 5 decades. They were granted their wish for more years. 3 more anniversaries came and passed, each one precious. Ethan grew increasingly frail, his body finally succumbing to the cumulative wear of 70-plus years of hard frontier life. But his mind remained sharp, and his love for Zara never wavered. One morning in spring, as the wildflowers were blooming across the ranch land, Ethan did not wake up. He passed peacefully in his sleep, Zara still in his arms as she had been for more than 53 years. The grief nearly broke her. For weeks, she moved through the house like a ghost, unable to fully accept that he was gone. Her children worried, gathering around to support her, but she seemed unreachable in her sorrow. It was Thomas who finally got through to her. He found her sitting on the porch one evening, staring out at the sunset with tears streaming down her face. He would not want this, Thomas said gently, sitting beside her. He would not want you to stop living just because he is gone. How can I live without him? Zara asked brokenly. He was my life, my whole life. No, Thomas said firmly. He was part of your life, an enormous part, but not the whole of it. You are still here, Mother. You still have children and grandchildren who love you and need you. You still have the school and the community that depend on you. You still have yourself. Dad gave you a full life, but he did not take it with him when he left. You still have it, and you owe it to him to keep living it. His words slowly penetrated her grief. Over the following weeks and months, Zara began to emerge from the darkness. She would never stop missing Ethan, never stop feeling the absence where he should be. But she learned to carry that grief alongside the good memories, the love that remained even though he was gone. She lived 4 more years, staying active and involved until the very end. She still taught occasionally, working with struggling students who needed extra help. She spent time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, passing down stories of the early days, of how she and Ethan had built everything from nothing. On what would have been their 57th wedding anniversary, Zara asked Thomas to take her to Wallace, to the train station where it had all begun. He drove her in his automobile, the modern convenience feeling odd but appropriate somehow, linking past and present. The station had been rebuilt since her day, modernized and expanded, but the basic platform was the same, and she could still see in her mind's eye the bench where she had sat crying all those years ago. I was so afraid, she told Thomas, standing on the platform. So lost and alone. And then your father stopped and everything changed. In one moment, my whole life pivoted in a new direction. Do you ever regret it? Thomas asked. Marrying him so quickly. Never, she said firmly, the same answer she had given Ethan on their 10th anniversary and every time he had asked since. It was the best choice I ever made. Your father gave me everything, Thomas. He gave me you and your siblings, this family, this life. I was so lucky to have him for as long as I did. He was lucky to have you too, Thomas said. He told me once, near the end, that every day he woke up grateful that he had stopped that day, that he had taken the chance on you. He said you were the best thing that ever happened to him. Zara felt tears on her cheeks but did not wipe them away. We were so young, she marveled. I was 24 and he was 30, and we thought we knew what we were doing. We had no idea how hard it would be, how challenging frontier life would prove, but we figured it out together. We built something beautiful together. They stayed at the station for an hour, Zara lost in memories while Thomas stood quietly nearby. Finally, she was ready to leave. Take me home, she said. To the ranch, that is where I belong. 6 months later, Zara passed away in her sleep, in the same bed she had shared with Ethan for so many years. She was 77 years old and had lived a full, rich life far beyond what she had imagined possible when she first arrived in the territory as a frightened young woman. Her funeral was the largest Cedar Springs had ever seen. Students she had taught over 4 decades came to pay their respects, some traveling from far away. Community members whose children and grandchildren had benefited from her dedication filled the church. And of course, her enormous family, 3 children, 12 grandchildren, and 23 great-grandchildren, all gathered to say goodbye. They buried her beside Ethan on a hill overlooking the ranch, the 2 of them together again as they had been in life. The headstones were simple, just their names and dates, and below that, a single line that Zara had requested before she died. Love finds us when we least expect it. The ranch continued under Thomas's leadership, then eventually passed to his children. The Sinclair name became synonymous with integrity and hard work in that part of New Mexico. The school Zara had helped establish grew into a regional institution known for educational excellence. And the story of how Ethan and Zara met, the cowboy and the stranded woman who fell in love in less than a week, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. Because it was a story worth telling, a reminder that sometimes the most important moments in life come when we least expect them, when we make the choice to stop and help a stranger in need. It was a story about courage and faith, about taking chances and building something beautiful from nothing. It was a story about love, real and lasting and strong enough to withstand everything the world could throw at it. And most of all, it was a story about 2 people who found each other at exactly the right moment, who recognized something special in each other instantly, and who chose to build a life together despite all the practical reasons not to. They proved that sometimes the crazy choice is the right choice, that love at first sight can be real and lasting, and that a moment of kindness can change everything. The ranch still stands, passed down through 6 generations now, still working, still productive. The original house has been preserved, maintained as a monument to the couple who started it all. Tourists sometimes come to see it, drawn by the romantic story, and the current generation of Sinclairs welcomes them, proud of their heritage. On the hill where Ethan and Zara rest, wildflowers bloom every spring, painting the ground in brilliant colors. Their descendants visit often, bringing their children to meet their ancestors, to feel connected to this history that is such an essential part of who they are. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun is setting over the land Ethan and Zara loved so much, if you stand very still and listen carefully, you can almost hear the echo of their voices on the porch, talking and laughing together, planning their future, expressing their love. The land remembers them, holds their memory in every blade of grass, every stone, every fence post they built together. Their story became more than just family history. It became a testament to the power of love, the importance of kindness, and the magic that can happen when we open ourselves to unexpected possibilities. It reminded everyone who heard it that life can change in a moment, that the choice to help someone in need can lead to extraordinary things, and that true love, when you find it, is worth any risk. The frontier they knew is long gone, replaced by modern cities and highways and all the conveniences of the 21st century. But the values they lived by, the love they shared, the family they created, these things endure. They built something that lasted far beyond their own lives, a legacy that continues to touch people generations later. And it all started with a simple act of compassion. A cowboy who saw a woman crying at a train station and chose to stop, to ask what was wrong, to help. That single choice rippled outward through time, creating a family, a community, a love story for the ages. In the end, that is what matters most, not the grand gestures or the dramatic moments, but the simple choice to be kind, to take a chance on connection, to believe that love is possible even in the most unlikely circumstances. Ethan and Zara proved that such love is not just possible but transformative, capable of creating something beautiful and lasting from the most unpromising beginnings. Their story lives on, told around dinner tables and at family gatherings, a reminder to each new generation of Sinclairs about where they came from and what they are capable of. It teaches them to be brave, to take chances, to believe in love even when logic says to be cautious. It shows them that the best things in life often come from unexpected places, from moments of crisis transformed into opportunities for joy. And so the legacy continues, built on the foundation those two people created more than a century ago, when a cowboy and a stranded woman took a chance on each other and found everything they had been looking for. Their love story became the bedrock on which everything else was built, proof that sometimes, against all odds, fairy tales can come true. All it takes is courage, compassion, and the willingness to believe that love can find us anywhere, even on a dusty train platform in a nowhere town in the middle of the frontier. That is the story of Ethan Sinclair and Zara Fontaine, two people who found each other when they both needed it most and built a life that exceeded their wildest dreams. It is a story of love and faith, and the incredible things that become possible when we open our hearts to unexpected possibilities. And it is a story that will continue to inspire as long as there are people who believe in the transformative power of love, the importance of kindness, and the magic that happens when two souls recognize each other as meant to be.